Welcome back. Previously, we created an account and secured it and set up a budget. Now let's get into some theory about AWS Control Tower. So multi-accounts, landing zones, secured AWS environments, and why you need them. So one account is plenty, and we could carry on and build all that we need in that one account. However, AWS accounts are natural hard boundaries between resources. Consider an account as a resource container. An AWS account is the best unit of isolation between the groups of resources you create. Since users live within an account, if a user's permissions were to be elevated beyond what they should be, if the account itself is service restricted, then the user is limited in the damage that they can do. The same logic applies if an application is breached. Other accounts can have guardrails put in place where the management account cannot. You can prevent and detect bad practices within an account due to these guardrails. Typically, running workloads in the management account is considered bad practice, since some services can run cross-account, and since accounts can be restricted, using multiple accounts is the obvious way to go. I have mentioned this already, and I will be showing this in an upcoming walkthrough, but just to recap, AWS Organizations is a product by AWS. Organizations allows us to manage and invite multiple AWS accounts together under one organization. We often use this within the management account. One great feature of AWS Organizations is centralized billing, which allows child accounts to invoice against the card details of the management account by passing up their quotas. We can also define service control policies through AWS Organizations, which allow us to restrict the services an organizational unit can do. An organizational unit, or OU, is a grouping of one or more AWS accounts. All accounts and OUs live within the root container, which technically is not an OU in itself. Resources in one account can use resources from another account when configured. For example, let's say we have an account for hosting WordPress sites. This will comprise of multiple availability zones, hosting EC2 instances, which are virtual computers, running the WordPress software. We may also be using features such as S3 or Memcached for hosting images for WordPress sites cheaply. Remember, this account has its own concept of users as well, so these EC2 instances will be running under roles defined in IAM within this account. And we could have multiple of these accounts for different environments. We could have, this is a live one, but we could also have a test one, a dev one, or even an account for running the WordPress sites for a very specific client, or a big client. All of these accounts and all of these WordPress EC2 instances could reuse the same network infrastructure that was created in a shared account, or a network account in a shared services OU. The VPC, or Virtual Private Cloud, could be created in this account, and the WordPress accounts, up here, live, dev, test, big client, could use the subnets defined in the VPC created here. So all the IP addresses and all the network infrastructure will actually be from live, dev, big client, will all be the same network infrastructure defined in a different account. This could help us manage costs and also keep centralized networking logs and analytics. So we can do plenty with this. I mean, for example, let's say we had to create a VPC for each account running WordPress. Well, that's a bunch of new VPCs, and if they need private subnets that talk to the internet, that's creating resources that do cost money. So we can really use some cost savings through shared accounts. And we could also have a shared account for hosting our domain name. So we can have a different account in the shared services for using Route 53 and hosting our domain name. And then what we can do is, in these child accounts, we can also use Route 53 and manage the subdomain. So we can have test.example.com, or in another account we can have bigclients.example.com, with the actual example.com domain itself being managed here. That brings us to landing zones. So what is a landing zone? Well, a landing zone is a secured multi-account environment which supports the workloads you create. It's a starting point for expanding your organization and running new resources. AWS Control Tower creates a landing zone for you. If we look at the blue lines here, we can see what is made and what is used. So firstly, AWS Organizations is used to create a core organizational unit. This is often referred to as the core OU, or the security OU, or the foundational OU. All of those are different names for the same thing. These house two accounts, the audit account and the log archive account. These two accounts, plus the management or master account, comprise the shared accounts. Guardrails and service catalog is used to pre-configure these two additional accounts by using the account baseline. The audit account is used to monitor all the accounts we have in Control Tower, all the AWS accounts we have. So any custom auditing software should be placed in this account, whilst the log archive account is an account which should be considered as a read-only account under most scenarios. This stores all logs coming from all accounts managed by AWS Control Tower. These accounts, as I said, were created from a common account baseline, which is also what is used when creating more accounts using Control Tower, using AWS Control Tower's account factory. So AWS Control Tower uses a product called Account Factory, which is basically AWS Config and AWS Service Catalog, and this bootstraps new accounts. So down here you can see new accounts can have geographic restrictions and can have a VPC deployed in them in the regions we define. The accounts run our workloads and forward security and access logs up to the core OU accounts. So when creating our landing zone and setting up Control Tower, we also have to define an additional OU. This is often called sandbox, but people often call it workloads or shared services, and you can create multiple OUs anyway. But this is where we store our production workloads and any other shared services. Control Tower's account factory makes sure these are set up in the correct way, with the correct guardrails, and the same way the landing zone log archive accounts were created. So I hope that makes sense at a conceptual level. There's other things to go into, such as how AWS Identity Center, formerly known as SSO, works, but essentially that will be covered in greater detail in a later course. But that allows us to create users and give them cross-account access through single sign-on. We can also prescribe permission sets to these users and groups so that they can access these accounts under limited roles. So I hope that makes sense anyway, and I hope to cover that more in the next slide. So let's just go into some real-world production scenarios and see how that might look. So here we have a more real-world-like scenario. At the top we have the management account we've already created. This contains Control Tower, AWS Organizations, and AWS Identity Center. This is the account with the payment details. Now Identity Center is a free service, it's free of cost, and it's also how we grant users, corporate employees, access to AWS. Through this we can also grant access to other services such as Dropbox, Microsoft Office, Slack, Salesforce, etc. So this is the place we'll create our users in first. If you have an Office account with Exchange, for example, or some sort of mail service, then this is Amazon's recommended way of granting those services to your AWS users. But more on the details of that later though, because we will go through Identity Center in greater detail later. So through Control Tower, we've already created our two organizational units, our main ones. One to house the security accounts, which is the secured zone. This contains the audit account and log archive account. And then we have this shared services organizational unit, which is the custom one we've created. The shared services OU has two accounts, one for managing the domains we've bought, and one for hosting a directory service, which is used for work mail and workspaces. We then have our workloads OU, which houses the accounts for our WordPress sites. And also we have a sandbox OU with a sandbox account, which is used for experimentation and has a stricter budget, which is basically for developers just to have a play around in. So these accounts were created through Account Factory, which is a feature of Control Tower. So I hope that makes sense, and if not, stick around for the walkthroughs and hopefully it will make more sense then. AWS Control Tower provides a control panel and tools for creating and monitoring a secure, compliant, and multi-account AWS environment according to best practices. Control Tower creates that environment as a landing zone, which is an organization-wide container that holds all organizational units and accounts. These accounts are created with guardrails. Guardrails are high-level rules that provide ongoing governance expressed in plain English and are either preventative or detective. Control Tower also provides a product called Account Factory. Account Factory provides a configurable account template to standardize the creation of new accounts with pre-approved configurations. Control Tower Account Factory provides an automated workflow for account creation and creates accounts with guardrails. Lastly, Control Tower provides a dashboard. This dashboard gives visibility of continuous insight of the landing zone, allows you to view provisioned accounts, allows you to see guardrails enabled, and allows you to see non-compliant resources. Control Tower also integrates with Identity Center to give users access to multiple AWS accounts. That was a lot of theory, so let's get started with the walkthrough.
To get started, let's go to Control Tower. Notice we're logged in as the administrator user, and we should see an error. Yep. Okay. So we need to log in with the root account to really do anything with this. So let's log out. Log back in. And we want to sign in with root. So this is the root email used. So for me it is this. Quite long-winded, but okay. Then I want the password, and then we're going to want the MFA code as well. So get that in there. Yep. Yoink. May have to do this capture. Historically, I've not done great on these, so let's see. Of course. Okay, let's try that password one more time. Okay, MFA code. Okay, so I must have just entered my password in wrong, that's fair enough, but okay, here we are. So let's go ahead and go back to Control Tower. Okay, straight away you see the setup landing zone. So this is what we want to do to set up our well-architected environment. So straight away we have the home region. I would recommend doing pretty much everything in North Virginia. That's where most of the features are kept in. And also this is where you need to be in, if anything, with Route 53 if you're going to be registering domains that way. So region deny setting, let's not enable that. And we can govern extra regions. So let's say you want Ireland. You can do that if you want some websites deployed to Ireland. Click next. So, okay, so this is the foundational OU. So this is where the two accounts are created, audit and log archive, sorry. I'm going to call this foundational. We may add more accounts to that OU if needed in the future. If you're going to be doing anything with serious compute or anything where you need networking, then creating a networking account in the foundational OU would make sense, where you can create your VPC or VPCs and expose the subnets to other accounts. Then we're going to have an additional OU. Normally this is called sandbox. We can probably call this something like workloads. Next. Okay, so you need an email address for the log archive account and an email address for the audit account. So using the same logic, you can do that. And then something similar here. Enable CloudTrail. Leave that as default, leave that as default, next. Yep. Click that button to understand, and then you can set up your landing zone. So this will take a while. This could take up to an hour, maybe longer. Once this is created, we'll have our organizational structure in organizations. I'll show you that. We'll have 2 additional OUs and I believe 2 additional accounts. So that's fine. You can leave that like that. You can close the browser if you want. Come back when this is done. Okay, so now that control tower is set up and you have your landing zone, let's have a look and see what is actually offered to us. So we start off with a dashboard, and this gives us an overview of our AWS environment, which is now not just our management account, but also 2 extra accounts. So we have log archive and we have audit. I've already explained in some detail the purpose of this in the theory, but there will be links provided for more detailed information on organizations as well as AWS well architected. But simply, we can see our organization here. We have the root OU, which technically isn't an OU, it's just a container for everything, which houses our management account, which is the first one we created, as well as this empty workloads OU and a foundational or security OU. This is where any sort of shared services or any foundational parts live. This is essentially your landing zone. So you have the log archive and you have the audit account. And then any new accounts we create will go into workloads. So we can see we also have guardrails. These are preventative and detective actions which provide safety over the accounts. So we have preventative ones, such as disallow the deletion of log archive, and if we just go to the dashboard we can see which ones are enabled and which ones aren't. So that's enforced, that's a preventative one, and that's clear, that's a detective one. So nothing suspicious going on here. We can carry on and see others that aren't enabled, some that are clear, some that are enforced, and quite a lot of foundational enforced ones. These are designed to stop bad practice, so any malicious action from anyone in your organisation, any disgruntled IT employees can't do anything too serious and do too much damage, and also any misconfigurations can't be drastic. So if we go down to Accounts Factory, this is where we can create new accounts. So over the course we'll be creating a optional domains account if we're using Route 53 for registering our domain. If you'd rather use something like GoDaddy or 123reg to register your domain name, then feel free. You don't have to do that, but we'll be creating a domains account in case we will. And we'll also create a directories account which will store our user directories of our employees, and where we'll configure workspaces, so desktop environments for them, email addresses, so work mail. And then if we go down here, we also have user and access, which I won't go into too much detail now, but this is to provide federated access to AWS. So you can access multiple of your AWS accounts using a single login page. So I can show the basics of this. I've not got it configured yet, but through here we have a link we can provide people. And we can also use this to provide access to other third-party apps like Salesforce, Dropbox, Office to those federated users. We have the shared accounts which was set up when we set up Control Tower. And then we have the settings for our landing zone. So what we can do here is a bunch of configuration over the landing zone. So I've already enabled this, but this is region deny settings. So we can deny any region we haven't explicitly configured Control Tower to govern. So in our case, North Virginia and Ireland. It takes about an hour for this to run if you want to enable this, but that will prevent anyone from deploying resources into, say, California or Frankfurt. We have a bunch of other options as well, such as Cloud Trail configuration, log configuration, and encryption configuration. So this is essentially our landing zone, our shared overview of our entire AWS environment. It's through user and access where we will be registering our business users and providing them with access to different software sets. So I hope this has been useful, and this is essentially an overview of what we can do with Control Tower. Again, for more information on the technical details and deep dives of Control Tower, there will be links provided. So what we want to do now is we want to create some organizational units, or should I say one organizational unit and some accounts. So if we go to Organization, create resources, and then create organizational unit, we can create a shared services OU, which is a child of root. Let's create that. And we can see we have this shared services organizational unit, which may take some time to, not yet, may take some time to register, but that's okay. Just come back when that's finished. Okay, so shared services is registered. So now what we want to do is go and create an account. We'll be creating 2 accounts, but if you're not doing the next part of this course, which is registering a domain name through Route 53, if you already have a domain name or would rather use a third-party provider, then you don't have to create the domains account. We will also be creating a user directory account for setting up our user directories and workspaces and workmail. So go to Account Factory and create an account. What you'll see straight away is maybe an error, but at least this message saying we can't because we're signed in as root. So this probably is a good start into Identity Center. So what you'll notice, if we just get rid of that, is we should have something like this. So you should have credentials emailed to you, something like this. So what we want to do is accept that invitation through the link. Okay, and that's asking us to set some sort of password. Make sure you set a strong password. And that's created that account. So we're not going into too much detail on this just yet, but this has created us an account and it will allow us to log in and access our accounts. So let's set our username. So that should be something like just our email address. Okay. Then you'll need the password you just set. And that will sign you in. And what you can see is I now have access to all 3 accounts as both administrator access and service catalog end user. I'll go into more about this later, but for now, you can close out of here, go and log in as admin, and you should see we are logged in as a federated user as administrator. Okay, so let's go back to Control Tower. We want to create our account. Account Factory, create account. Okay, it should no longer apply to us. No red message, that's good. And what I'm going to do now is create the domains account. So you'll notice I've not been using a corporate email yet, we've not done that bit yet. That's fine. We will create our own email, apologies. We will create our own mailbox and our own email address for our users to use, but for now, just use an email you already have. So we're going to create the domains account. The name of the account. You can copy that name, create a user in Identity Center. And the OU will be the shared services. So create that account. Awesome. It's now going to provision the account. We can only provision 1 account at a time through this method. If you try and create another one now, it will not work. More detailed information on the Control Tower and account creation, Account Factory will be provided as links. So wait for that to create and then we can go and create our second account. A little tip to track status as well as to keep costs down. Firstly, in Account Factory, if you go to Network Configuration and Edit, you can actually prevent VPCs from being created, virtual private clouds, network infrastructure, from being created in certain regions. and you could also make it internet accessible. So doing this will create a elastic network interface and a internet gateway which will run at costs. Just keep that off if you don't want to do any public networking in that account. And you can change the CIDR range and number of private subnets and disable certain regions. So that might be useful if you need some sort of cost savings, or if you don't need resources created in one account. But you shouldn't have to do much with these settings. And then to track the status of an account, go to Service Catalog, Provisioned Products, and you can see this one's still under change. Okay, now our account's available, we can go and create another one. So firstly we can see that within the organization now. Should be able to anyway. Yep. So what we can do is we can create another one. So edit this, we don't need North Virginia, maybe just a VPC in Ireland, or wherever we want to deploy our workspaces to. We just need one either way. So that's Ireland. Create an account. So this will be okay. A username, so by the same vein we can do this, and this is going to be under shared services. So this is the account where we will be creating a user directory using director service, so we can manage users, workspaces, so we can provide our users with a desktop they can remote into using Amazon's remote desktop software. We will provide a mailbox and email address through Workmail. So press create for that, and we should see under change. Awesome. So come back when that's done and we can get started with some domain work.